the Tory party and the Labour Party have largely misunderstood changes in society that have led to changes, not so much in voting patterns, but changes in the drivers behind how people vote. So, I think we have moved away from any kind of, left-right voting pattern, at least for the moment. And I think the only two parties that have identified an actual grouping of society that they are successfully targeting are the Reform Party and the Green Party. I'm talking UK-wide here, but it does apply to a degree, or to a significant degree in Scotland as well. And I think that sector of society, which would be, anti-landlord, the sort of eco-populism that Polanski talks about, basically, high welfare, high tax, anti-wealth, basically. I don't want to generalise too much, but I do think that is a sector which exists, absolutely. I think it's a sensible political strategy to try to tap into that sector. I suppose I would have two challenges about that grouping, though. They're not always going to be 23, which is one of the challenges that I would put towards it, okay? They're going to be 33 and 43. They're going to have a house. They're going to be paying tax. They're not going to think this way all their lives. And polling shows that is the case. I think that's one challenge I would put towards it. And the other one that I'm really interested in comes back to next May, because I think that you've both made clear that in principle you would like to be back in government. You liked being in government. You felt you got things done. And I think you want to be back there. I would put it to you that there is a challenge ahead on that. And the challenge, I think, is this, is that John Swinney is not likely to get the majority he's talking about in May. It's probably not impossible, but it's not likely. So he's going to need help from somebody. But in that 5 years of government, it's very possible that Nigel Farage will be Prime Minister. And for the pro-independence movement to advance beyond where they are just now and effectively make independence inevitable, when Nigel Farage is Prime Minister, a lot of centrists, non-political, non-card-carrying people in Scotland will be looking for somewhere to go. And I think that if John Swinney is in a coalition or an agreement with you guys at that point, I think they're going to struggle to go there. If he's in an agreement with the Lib Dems at that point, I think they'll find it much easier as a sort of centrist, non-political voter to say, I could give independence a crack here because it looks like these people are going to be a reasonable alternative to the fact that Westminster's on fire. And I think that from a strategic point of view, I'm not sure John Swinney can afford to go into coalition with you guys and the set of policies aimed at the sort of people that you have.
Ross, Gillian, before you answer that, I think you should feel really, really pleased and privileged that you've just listened to the longest meandering question we've ever had on the Holyrood Sources podcast, and you were there to witness it. Bloody hell, Maciver.
You should have come in earlier.
Gillian, do you want to have a go at tackling Andy's sermon?
I hope Geoff's having a better morning at some point today, bless his heart. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I take issue with Andy's sermon in a couple of places. I think there were a lot of people who reacted very positively to the Bute House Agreement the first time round. There's an issue for us that a lot of things have been eroded that we did, and there's definitely a trust element that would have to be rebuilt there, that anything we did do and anything we got done wouldn't then go backwards or just stall and not happen at all. Conversion practices is one of those, the ban on conversion practices is one of those examples. I think there's plenty that we offer to folk who are on the left and maybe slightly more towards centre as well. Under 22's free bus, the rent controls that we've got. There's plenty of things that we are doing. Wiping out school meal debt that Ross led on and delivering more free lunches for kids. That does target those in there who are 33 and 43. If their kids are getting a good free school lunch, if their kids have got better prospects and able to move about more, and they're not having to be mum or dad's taxi to take them everywhere. And this is what we mean by Ross and I really have to take the party and move it on with that generation that we entered the party through, and make sure that it does align with those who maybe voted for us when they were 23 and they're now 33, and we still want them there with us and pushing us forward. So there's loads that we've got a policy reference document that would keep us going for the next century, trying to get through it all. So we're not short on ideas, and they'll be coming forward thick and fast as we head to next May.
Yeah. Ross, did you want to take on any of Andy's many points?
Yeah, and that point of that they're not 23 anymore. Well, I mean, neither are we. But what's really interesting, I think this is relatively unique to the UK, is that millennials are not becoming more right wing as they get older. In quite a few other countries, that is the case. It's not the case in the UK. There's an interesting thing about Gen Z and Gen Alpha and what their politics are going to be and where they land. But millennials not becoming more right-wing, staying left, staying progressive. And that's partly because far fewer 33-year-olds live in a home that they own now than 33-year-olds did 10, 20, 30 years ago. Part of it is that, but part of it's about social values as well. And we're well aware of the fact that some of the people who voted for us when they were 23 in crappy private rented accommodation in cities are 33 and still live in crappy private rented accommodation in cities and still vote for us. Some of them do have their own home and a young family and live in a new build in the suburbs. And the interesting thing is they're still voting for us as well. That's where our growth has come from. On the point about the SNP, again, it's worth emphasising that I feel like the history of the Bute House Agreement often gets rewritten. The SNP's popularity wasn't dented by going into government with us. The SNP's popularity started to decline the moment that Nico stood down and there was a police investigation into the finances and a really brutal leadership election, etc. Up until that point, there had been 2 years of government with us, or 18 months of government with us, where together we had delivered policies that were popular, like free bus travel for young people. And the universality of that, an important point when you're thinking about I think the kind of people that Andy's talking about certainly are going to be broadly middle class. Universal offers like universal free bus travel are important to them as well. We're well aware, though, that particularly for that, the core demographic, the young people who really drove us after the referendum to become that much more significant political force, policies like childcare, what's our early learning and childcare offer going into the next election? That's the kind of stuff we're going to get into, because the point we want to make is a lot of the policies that tackle the climate emergency, one of our core issues, are also cost of living policies, things like making public transport cheaper, that kind of stuff. Put quite simply, we're going to go into the election saying to folk, we're going to help you save money and we're going to protect this planet. Those are the top two things that we're going to stand for, and we have a track record of delivering on both. That's what's really important. But from our research, 25% of people in Scotland really strongly align with our values. They really like us. 25% of people don't vote Green yet, and a lot of it because they're just not sure if we deliver. The reason that we've been able to grow our support through that period of being in government, when everybody, the kind of conventional wisdom was that junior parties get trashed, we grew our support in government because we delivered the policies that those voters wanted us to deliver. Sure, it was difficult. Being in government is difficult. You never get everything that you want, but we were able to tangibly prove that if you vote Green, you will get green things like scrapping peak fares on ScotRail.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? And sorry, I feel very rude for coming in halfway through this, but I do want to consider this. I was at an investment summit yesterday at RBS's Goulburn complex, and there was an international global investment community there alongside key representatives of our energy, financial services and life sciences sector. And it was all about how we unlock investment for Scotland's growth sectors. What's your message to them as the Green Party? Because combined, they employ a good 70 to 80% of the people in the private sector jobs in our country. What is your message and your pitch to them going into the next election? Why should they vote for the Green Party?
So on a kind of macroeconomic level, I've got one big concern that I'll then kind of put aside and answer that directly. on a macro level, I think we often talk about the fact that Scotland performs really well on foreign direct investment as something to be proud of. I think we should be proud of the reasons why we perform well on foreign direct investment. So, for example, we have a highly educated, highly skilled population. My concern about the fact that Scotland has now done so well on FDI for so long is that less and less of Scotland's economy is actually controlled from Scotland, and a lot of wealth disappears from our economy as a result of that. So I want to see more companies headquartered in Scotland rather than more multinationals invest in Scotland, but ultimately where the wealth that they generate is in large part then extracted. But that's a kind of macroeconomic point. On that specifically, saying if we are saying to people, what's the message here? The message here is we are a party that is serious about actually having that highly skilled workforce, investing in education, investing in apprenticeships, and people being able to work where you need them to work because houses actually exist there and are available there. So we want to expand provision of affordable housing. We want to massively expand transport infrastructure because we know that that kind of connectivity is absolutely key to the economy. Now, for us in transport infrastructure, we're open about the fact that, and Geoff, you and I have talked about this before, we want to expand rail networks, we want to make bus travel free, we want to make it certainly more affordable, but we want to get to the point where it's free and it's in public ownership. Like, we know that investment in public transport infrastructure is really good for economic productivity. We know that investment in early years education, expanding access to childcare is really important for economic productivity. Like, there's a whole section of the potential workforce who are shut out because of the lack of availability of childcare. But we're totally honest about the fact that to do all of that stuff, you need to be able to pay for it. And we all know Scotland's public finances are not sustainable right now. A choice is coming, and the choice is either between raising significant amounts of additional revenue, tax reform, or significantly cutting public services. I respect the honesty of people who say that to balance the books, we're going to need to cut public services, but I disagree with that outcome. We're going to be totally upfront and honest about the fact that the kind of social democratic Scotland that we believe is possible is going to require a lot of investment. And it is, if you want to go back historically, it's kind of FDR style New Deal stuff. We want to raise a lot of revenue, invest that in the infrastructure that our society needs. So if you've got good quality childcare and you've got good public transport links, you're a pretty attractive place for people to invest in and set up their headquarters in.
Great, yeah, good answer, really. And I agree with you in your first sentiment, actually, about, we want to see more Scottish companies growing, scaling and headquartering here. So let me just take one follow-up very briefly then. The vast majority of the energy supply chain that we have, and largely clustered around where I'm calling in from today, are Scottish companies that have been born out of oil and gas. And so my direct question to you is, Climate Change Committee and just about every authority suggests that we need oil and gas in our energy system until 2050. There's no authority that will tell you otherwise. Do you think that we should be producing as much as we should from our own domestic supply or relying on imports from overseas, given what you just said about trying to support domestic companies?
I'm not going to accept the premise of that, because I think our answer to that is that everything we should be doing should be geared around reducing our reliance on oil and gas. And fine, if you really push me to accept the premise, of course, domestic is better than import. It's worth bearing in mind, though, that a lot of the new fields that are proposed in the North Sea would not be for domestic consumption. They would overwhelmingly 80-90%. You're talking about
Jackdaw is 6% of the UK's gas supply.
And on gas in particular, gas is one area where we're catastrophically failing on climate ambitions. What we need, gas primarily, what you're talking about is how we heat homes and buildings is one of the key reasons why the UK and Scotland are failing on climate. What we need to do is move away from a gas-based heating system as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean turn it off today. We're not suggesting that. But everything we do needs to be geared around that switch, because even where it's about domestic production or domestic extraction, you're still part of a global market. The global gas market is not going to become more stable. Gas is not going to become cheaper in the long run. So this is also about consumers and making sure that in the long term, it doesn't become financially impossible to turn your heating on in Scotland once it gets to this time of the year and a little bit later. So everything we do needs to be geared towards that shift. And in the case of gas, and heating, it's taken us towards an electricity-based heating network.
Really good story. I'm very sorry. I find this very fascinating because you've said some really interesting things there, and a lot of which I agree with. And by the way, I think you and I both agree on what the desired outcome. It's just how we get there and whether we use our own resources or not to get there. And I believe that we should. And I believe you agree that as well from what you've just said. Can I ask just one technical question? Because one of the things that we're seeing in offshore wind and I'm working with a lot of the developers just now, is there's delays and delays and delays of projects. We haven't got a gram of steel yet in the North Sea. As you know from Scotland, our INTOG is going to take time for various reasons. But one of the reasons is Chinese manufacturers. We can't use Chinese manufacturers, and we're having to look at other alternatives, of which they're already full at capacity or don't have the ability yet to enter the market domestically. What's your view on using Chinese manufacturers for offshore wind?
Instinctively very uncomfortable for a whole range of reasons. China is a competitor, and China in geostrategic terms is an opponent. Like, China doesn't have our best interests at heart here. Making our supply chain reliant on China carries really, really significant risks. Now, China is also a massive hub for global manufacturing in all sorts of ways, so you can't just avoid it and cut it out of the supply chain. But that, to me, points towards the long-term failure of Scottish, UK and European industrial and manufacturing policy, that we are so reliant on China. And what we need is to take, certainly, it would be great if we were producing steel in Scotland. But the European Union's done a lot of work around low carbon steel. I think we need to be part of a Europe-wide response on stuff like that. So there's the geostrategic risk. China and the US are going to end up in a trade war at some point. Europe is going to be stuck in the middle. Being reliant on China for all sorts of stuff is going to be an issue, but being reliant on China for parts of our energy infrastructure presents a monumental risk. There is also a human rights element to this as well, because think about what are the conditions in which steel is being produced in China? Well, we know that China's had 2 million Muslims in concentration camps. We know that they use them as slave labor. I'm very involved with the Tibetan exile community. We know that Tibetan children are being stolen from their parents and put into forced boarding schools that they come out of not even able to speak Tibetan anymore, so they can't speak to their parents. There are massive concerns about what's happening in China. Then you get to the surveillance state element of it, the export of those kind of technologies, how compromised we become. So China, massive issue. We could have a whole other episode talking about that. But I think on the point of energy infrastructure in particular, we are now facing the consequences of decades of failure of industrial planning, that we don't have that capacity in Scotland, UK, or indeed Europe-wide. We don't have the capacity we need.
Couple of questions just to finish then. Thank you so much for your time. It's really interesting having you both on as well. Gillian, can I ask you, is there any desire from the Scottish Greens to sort of link up more formally with the Greens of England and Wales? The split was in 1990, wasn't it? Is there any part of you that wants to re-bridge and formalise a connection with Zach Polanski et al.?
So we had a conference motion a few years ago to sever those official ties with the Green Party of England and Wales. I think Zach coming into leadership and other changes within the party, I think there's certainly parts of the party that are looking to whether those official connections should be re-established or not. I think certainly from what I've heard from some of our members, that's being looked on pretty favourably. I think we certainly should be making sure that we're obviously we're two different parties, but I think we should be looking to see where values align with the Green Party of England and Wales, and make sure that sorry, Calum's having his say as well.
Don't apologise, not at all. He's very welcome to. He's very welcome
You're
to.
chatting. Make sure that we're putting across those shared values, and where that policy overlaps, that we're putting forward that vision for what a more compassionate, better, fairer Scotland and UK could be overall. Because while we're stuck here, while we're stuck in the Union, we should be trying to work with the Green Party of England and Wales to make it better and fairer for everybody.
Well, that's the slight tension, isn't it?
Until we can get out.
Because didn't the party at large not really take much of a stance on independence? Would this make you a pro-independence UK-wide party? Is that what we would get to?
So the English and Welsh Greens were the only party in the rest of the, certainly the only party in England. Obviously, you've got Plaid, but the English and Welsh Greens were kind of soft supporters of independence, and a lot of their the leaders of their party actually came up and helped us with the Green Yes campaign. Officially, their position is they're in favour of Scotland's right to make this decision for itself. You'll find a lot of the people at the top of the Green Party of England and Wales are excited about not just the prospect of what an independent Scotland could be, but about the constitutional reform that would force on the rest of the UK, and the opportunity for a wider examination of the UK's democratic structures.
And I don't think whatever closer working we would be doing would ever be a formal joining up of the parties. I think we need we need the Scottish Greens
Yeah.
to be us.
Yeah, the 1990s split was amicable. It wasn't a falling
Yeah.
out. We just Green politics believes in decentralisation, so it made sense.
I can't imagine why you would want that. I mean, if you look at Scottish Labour and the Scottish Tories, their association with Westminster parties is going really well. So why you would not want to throw your lot in with a London-based party is utterly beyond me. But it's your party.
Would you say those Scottish parties have caught a cold after the English parties sneezed, Andy? Is that what you're saying?
There you go. I say it better.
You do, every time. Ross and Gillian, thank you both very much. Thank you for your time. Gillian, enjoy the rest of your maternity leave. And thank you for you and Calum joining us, in fact, this morning, I should say. And his contributions were suitably succinct, which is always, which is always a
Get
lesson
him
for us all,
registered
isn't
to
it?
stand. You could take
but
on
Gillian
Murdo
and
Fraser in the Perthshire seat.
That's right. Yeah, he's made the report. Gillian and Ross, thank you both very much. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.